Kalen stared at the flickering console, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrest tighter. The screen remained dead, no sign of life, no message, no sign that the Galactic Council, the once mighty protectors of humanity, had noticed their absence. The silence was deafening, a void that stretched beyond the cracked window, where the stars blinked cold and uncaring. It had been months since their last transmission. Months since humanity's cries for help had fallen on deaf ears. No reply. No rescue. No counsel. Just endless space, and the cruel weight of abandonment. Kalen ran a hand through his dark hair, frustrated. The ship creaked softly beneath him, a reminder of its age, its slow decay. It was old and broken, just like everything else. Humanity had always believed they were destined for more, conquerors of the stars, builders of worlds. But now, they were nothing but drifting remnants, lost and forgotten. Lyra sat in the corner of the dimly lit cabin, arms crossed, eyes blank as she stared at the dead screen alongside him. There was no hope in those eyes, only a hollow resignation. The once fierce resistance fighters, the soldiers who had braved alien worlds, had become hollow specters. They didn't even fight for us, Kalen said, his voice trembling with bitterness. Lyra shifted slightly, her dark eyes finding his. They didn't need to. We were already dead to them. Kalen clenched his jaw, the weight of her words settling deep in his chest. The Galactic Council had always claimed to be humanity's protectors, a force that would guide and guard their place in the galaxy. But that had been long ago. Long before humanity became a burden. A nuisance. The Council had decided humanity was no longer worth the effort. They had vanished, leaving Earth and its colonies to fend for themselves in the void. No signals. No reinforcements. No salvation. Kalen's fists clenched tighter against the armrest. They didn't even send a single message. No warning. No sign. Lyra didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was distant, lost in the expanse of stars beyond the window. They think we're already gone, she said finally, her voice hollow. They stopped caring. Kalen felt the weight of those words like a crushing burden. How could they be so easily discarded? Humanity had fought wars, built empires, and now, they were nothing but forgotten remnants, drifting in the void. We built this galaxy, Kalen said, his voice rising. We earned our place. Lyra didn't respond right away, just continued to stare at the stars, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Kalen had always been a man of action, fighting, surviving, pushing forward, but now, even he felt the sting of hopelessness creeping into his heart. They've abandoned us, Lyra said, as if repeating it would somehow make it real. The Council. The galaxy. They've moved on. Kalen gritted his teeth, the anger bubbling beneath his surface. Moved on? His voice cracked. We didn't ask for them to move on. We didn't ask for this. Lyra finally turned to him, her expression colder than the stars outside. No one asked? She said. They just stopped caring. The truth was bitter. Kalen had always known the Council had no real reason to protect humanity anymore. Earth was just one of countless species they had to deal with. Humanity, once a proud force, was now little more than an annoyance, too small, too insignificant, to be of any real concern. They think we're nothing but dust in their rearview mirror, Kalen said bitterly. Lyra's gaze flickered. Maybe we are. Kalen shook his head, frustration mounting. No. No, they can't. They can't just erase us like this. We built these stars. We fought for this place. How could they forget that? Lyra sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. They didn't forget, Kalen. They just chose not to remember. Kalen let those words hang in the air, feeling the weight of them. They can't leave us like this, he muttered. They can't. But they had. Left them alone. In the vastness of space, with no one to answer their calls, no one to come to their rescue. Humanity had always believed they were destined for more. Now, all that remained was the empty promise of the stars. The Council had abandoned them, and they were left adrift. Forgotten. Alone. The silence stretched again, heavy and oppressive. Kalen knew one thing for certain: if humanity was going to survive, it would have to be on its own. The council was gone, and they would never come back. It was time to stop waiting. It was time to rise. Kalen's fists tightened, his knuckles white against the worn control panel. The void stretched endlessly around them, silent and cold. But there was something different now, something beneath the surface of their despair. A fire, weak but stubborn, refusing to be snuffed out. He turned to Lyra, who sat slouched against the bulkhead, staring at nothing. The look on her face was one of quiet resolve now, her usual bitterness softened by the weight of their reality. "I won't let them win," Kalen said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded with doubt. Lyra met his gaze, a flicker of the same fire in her dark eyes. "Neither will I." They were alone. That much was undeniable. But Kalen couldn't accept that they had been abandoned without a fight. Humanity's survival instinct had always been fierce. The council might have forgotten them, but Kalen hadn't forgotten himself. "We've got nothing left," Lyra said, breaking the silence. "No support. No allies." Kalen gritted his teeth. "Then we become our own allies." The words hung between them, heavier than the emptiness of space. The council had left them to die, but Kalen wasn't ready to accept that fate. If humanity was going to survive, they would need to adapt. And fast. Kalen stood, his movements sharp and decisive. "We need answers. We need to find them." Lyra frowned, skepticism etched into her features. "And how exactly do we do that? The council doesn't just pop back into existence." Kalen's jaw tightened. "No. But there has to be a way. They didn't forget us entirely. They left a trail. They always leave a trail." Lyra looked at him, her gaze measuring. "You're still holding on to scraps of hope." "Scraps are better than nothing," Kalen replied. "We can't just drift forever." For the first time in weeks, Lyra's expression shifted. Her eyes narrowed, and a spark of determination returned. They had both fought wars, faced impossible odds, but this felt like a battle they couldn't afford to lose. Kalen grabbed a small, worn datapad from the console and flicked through the systems. The files were corrupted, and most of the data was lost. But there was one folder, damaged but still intact, labeled simply Council Signals. "We've tried everything else," Kalen said, holding up the datapad. "If they're out there, they've left something behind. A signal. A code. Something we missed." Lyra stepped closer, her eyes narrowing at the cracked screen. "Even if we find something, what can we do with it? The council's not going to respond to us." Kalen shook his head. "They have to. They can't ignore us forever." His voice trembled with the weight of his own desperation. The council couldn't simply erase humanity. Not completely. Kalen refused to believe they were just gone, forgotten. They were still out there, somewhere, pulling the strings of the galaxy. And Kalen was determined to find them, even if it meant tearing the stars apart. "All right," Lyra said, her tone softer now, though the skepticism lingered. "What's the plan?" Kalen hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. Then he looked at her with unwavering certainty. "We track the signal. We follow it to wherever it leads. And we don't stop until we get answers." Lyra didn't argue. The weight of their situation pressed down on her, but the fire in her eyes told Kalen she was in this with him. If humanity was going to have a chance, they would have to take matters into their own hands. "We're not alone in this," Lyra said, her voice steadier now. "But we'll have to rely on ourselves." Kalen nodded. "And maybe that's enough." They didn't have the council to guide them, but they had each other. And that, Kalen realized, might be all they needed to survive. The stars waited in silence. But Kalen and Lyra had no intention of staying adrift any longer. They were determined to claw their way back from the void, one step at a time. The freighter shook as it plunged through a storm of asteroid fragments, their small metallic shards slicing through the void like deadly spears. Kalen gripped the control panel, his knuckles white, as they narrowly avoided a collision. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back. They had followed the signal for days, weeks even, tracing the faint, flickering trace of electromagnetic energy through the darkness. The Council's signal, fragmented, broken, but undeniably theirs, led them into the unknown. The further they went, the harder the void pressed in on them. The nothingness seemed to grow thicker, heavier, swallowing them whole. Lyra leaned forward, her eyes scanning the radar. Still nothing. We're flying blind. Kalen didn't answer. He couldn't. The signal had led them this far, but the more they pressed on, the more he realized how little they truly understood. They had been chasing shadows, and now those shadows seemed to be growing darker. We can't stop now, Kalen said, his voice trembling with the weight of their journey. They're out there. They have to be. But doubts crept in. The Council had abandoned humanity, vanished into the void as if they no longer cared. Why would they leave a trail only for Kalen and Lyra to follow? What did they hope to achieve? Lyra stood abruptly, pacing the cabin. This is madness, Kalen. We're chasing ghosts. Kalen didn't argue. He knew it was madness. The further they went, the deeper the isolation became, but they had no choice but to push forward. The memory of humanity, forgotten, betrayed, drove them, spurring them on through the cold, unfeeling cosmos. We have to keep going, Kalen insisted, his voice stronger now. If we stop, it's over. Lyra stopped pacing, turning to face him. Her expression was hard, but beneath it, there was a flicker of something else, resolve. We've already lost everything, she said, her voice quieter. What if we're just chasing a mistake? A signal that wasn't meant for us? Kalen felt the sting of her words, but he didn't let them break him. He knew that doubt was the enemy now. They couldn't afford to doubt their purpose. The Council might have abandoned humanity, but Kalen couldn't abandon hope. We follow the signal, he said firmly. We have to. They pressed on through the storm, dodging floating debris that littered the path ahead. The signal flickered weakly, but it remained, calling to them. They had to trust that the signal meant something. Even if they couldn't see where it led, even if the void continued to stretch endlessly in all directions, they couldn't stop. Hours turned into days, and still, they pushed forward. Lyra stayed at the controls while Kalen tried to decipher the corrupted data on the datapad. The signal was a threadbare whisper now, barely a trace, but Kalen knew better than to let it slip away. The freighter groaned as they entered deeper space, the stars fading from sight as the void consumed everything around them. Kalen rubbed his eyes, exhausted, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't rest. Every minute they wasted was a minute further from humanity's fate. Then, as they cleared another asteroid field, the signal came stronger, clearer than before. Kalen snapped to attention. His heart pounded harder. We're close, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I can feel it. Lyra didn't respond, but Kalen could see the change in her posture. The fire in her eyes had reignited. We've followed this signal into the unknown, Kalen said, gripping the console tightly. It's led us this far. There's no turning back now. For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of the ship's systems and the distant echoes of their breathing. Then, in the distance, something flickered, a light. A shadow. A hint of something that wasn't supposed to be there. Kalen's breath caught. He knew what it was before he dared to believe it. A ship. A real ship. Lyra, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Do you see that? Lyra's eyes widened. A ship. It was there, a distant outline, barely visible in the growing darkness, but unmistakable. The Council's ship. The very one they had thought long gone, lost to time. Kalen's pulse quickened. It's them, he said. They didn't abandon us. They're here. Lyra stared out the window, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. What now? She asked quietly. Kalen didn't hesitate. He knew what had to be done. We're boarding that ship. We're getting answers. They had chased the Council's signal across the void. Now they had found them. And with the council within reach, Kalen knew they were about to face the truth, whether it was salvation or something far worse. Kalen stood on the deck of the council ship, the silence oppressive around him. The ship's corridors stretched endlessly, devoid of life, with only faint lights flickering in the distance. It felt surreal. The ship they had tracked through the void, the ship that had once ruled the galaxy, was now empty. Abandoned. He clenched his fists, the echoes of their journey reverberating through his mind. Lyra followed close behind, her face pale but resolute. "Where do we even start?" Lyra asked, her voice breaking the silence. Kalen didn't have an answer. The council had left no clear trail, no signs of life. The ship was a ghost ship, silent, lifeless, and hollow. Yet, as he stared at the faded control panels, something stirred deep within him. A quiet, burning realization. "They didn't forget us," Kalen said softly. "They just chose not to help." Lyra narrowed her eyes, stepping closer. "And now they're just waiting." Kalen nodded. "Waiting for what? For us to die out here?" His voice rose. "That's not how this ends." The council had been their protectors, their rulers, their oppressors. But now they were nothing. Just echoes of a past long forgotten. Humanity had always fought back, resisted. It was in their blood. And Kalen wasn't about to let the council's silence define their fate. "We need to find out why they're still here," Kalen said, his jaw tightening. "Why the ship hasn't left." They moved deeper into the ship, the silence growing heavier with each step. The corridors were dark, lifeless, devoid of movement. The once mighty ship felt like a tomb. Kalen's mind raced as they explored, piecing together fragments of information from their journey. The signal they had followed, it wasn't just a random relic of the past. It was something deliberate. Something left behind. Maybe they never left, Kalen muttered to himself. Lyra heard him and stopped in her tracks, turning to face him. "What do you mean?" Kalen paused, his eyes scanning the empty corridors. "What if they didn't abandon us? What if they were waiting? Hiding?" Lyra frowned. "Why? What for?" Kalen didn't have an answer yet. But he could feel it. The Council had always believed themselves to be the guardians of the galaxy. What if they had seen humanity's rise as a threat? What if they had stayed behind, watching, waiting for the right moment to reassert their control? "They're waiting for the right moment," Kalen said. "For what, though, I don't know." They continued down the silent corridors, deeper into the ship. The air grew colder, and Kalen couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even though there was no sign of life. They reached a sealed chamber, one of many along the corridor. Kalen pressed his hand against the control panel, and after a moment, the door hissed open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Inside, they found ancient terminals still humming weakly, the screens flickering with distorted images. Kalen approached one of the terminals and tapped at the keys. Static crackled, and then a faint image began to materialize, a shadowy figure in a council uniform. "Where are you?" Kalen whispered. The image flickered, distorted, and slowly cleared. A voice came through the static, low and distorted. "We are always watching." Kalen froze, his heart pounding. "Who are you?" The figure didn't respond right away. Then, after a long pause, the voice spoke again, clearer now, but still cold. "We are the ones who remain." Lyra stepped closer, her eyes narrowed. "What do you want from us?" The figure didn't react. The screen went black for a moment, only to flicker back to life. This time, there was a message, written in faint, glowing script. "Humanity will not be forgotten, but neither will they be spared." Kalen read the words aloud, his voice trembling. "What does that even mean?" Lyra shook her head, her brow furrowed. "They've been watching us this whole time. Waiting." The message repeated again, the words glowing brighter. Kalen could feel the weight of the Council's presence, even though they were nowhere to be found. They weren't gone, they were still there, watching, waiting for their moment to return. Kalen clenched his fists, the fire in his chest reigniting. Humanity had been abandoned, but not forgotten. And if the Council thought they could simply pick up where they left off, they were wrong. "We'll show them what happens when you try to erase humanity," Kalen said, his voice rising. "We'll fight." Lyra stood beside him, her expression set. No more waiting. No more running. They were alone in the galaxy now, but they weren't weak. The Council had tried to silence them, tried to erase them. But humanity was resilient. They had always been. And as Kalen looked at Lyra, he knew that they would rise again, stronger, more determined, and unwilling to be forgotten. The Council might still be there, but humanity had finally lost its patience. And it wouldn't stop until they reclaimed their place in the stars.